When I called my son for the 24th time in 3 days, he finally answered and said, "Stop calling us. We have our own lives." Then he hung up. My wife and I had already called hospitals, police stations, and booked a flight because we thought our children were missing. But when we arrived, we found them inside a luxury hotel ballroom celebrating an engagement party we were never invited to. They laughed at our fear until they learned what I still owned. I'm grateful you're here for this one. Before we dive in, drop a quick comment and tell me, what are you doing while you listen? Cooking, driving, or just taking a moment for yourself? Your words here mean more than you might realize. Quick note, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the lesson it carries. At 69, sitting on my back porch in Nashville, I can finally tell this story without my hands shaking. My wife Carolyn, 67, and still sharp as the day I met her 37 years ago, sits beside me in the kind of silence only decades of marriage can afford. She knows I'm ready to say it out loud, the thing that happened in late September 2024. The 3 days that showed me exactly what 40 years of sacrifice had built. I grew up in an orphanage outside Memphis. No parents, no photographs, no memory of anyone holding me or saying my name like it mattered. The dormitory had 18 beds, and I learned early that crying got you nothing but ignored. So I stopped. I watched the other boys cycle through. Some got adopted, some aged out, most just disappeared into the kind of life you build when no one teaches you what family means. I was 7 the first time another kid asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't say astronaut or firefighter. I said I wanted to be someone's father, the kind who showed up, the kind who answered when you called. You want to know what it does to a child growing up with no one. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you hungry. I left that orphanage at 17 with $200, a high school diploma earned in night classes, and a hunger so deep it scared me. Not hunger for food or money. Hunger for proof that I could be different, that I could build something permanent, something that wouldn't leave. When my son Alaric was born 32 years ago, I held him in the hospital and made myself a promise: this boy will never know that kind of empty. He'll never wonder if someone's coming for him. He'll have a father who builds something solid beneath his feet, something he can stand on when the world shifts. For 40 years I kept that promise. I built Brooks MedTech with my hands, and my back started in a garage workspace with second-hand equipment and a medical device prototype I'd been sketching for 3 years. Medical device manufacturing and distribution serving hospitals across the Southeast. Diagnostic tools, surgical instruments, monitoring equipment. The kind of products that don't make headlines but keep operating rooms running. 40 years. 18-hour days for the first decade. Sleeping on the factory floor when shipments ran late. Missing birthdays I swore I'd make up for later. Carolyn understood. She always did. She'd bring Alaric to the warehouse on Saturdays, let him play between the shipping pallets, while I double-checked orders. Our daughter Tamara came along 6 years later, same deal, childhood spent in the spaces between her father's work. I told myself I was building their future, a legacy, something they'd inherit and be proud of. Brooks MedTech grew. Garage to warehouse to a 3-building campus outside Nashville. Revenue climbed from 6 figures to 7 to 8. Contracts with hospital networks. Distribution partnerships across 12 states. By the time Alaric graduated college, we were valued at $52 million. And I'd kept my promise. My children never went without. Never wondered if I'd answer the phone. Never spent a night in a room with 17 other forgotten kids staring at the ceiling and wondering what you did wrong to deserve the silence. Let me tell you something about building a company. When you've got no safety net, no family money, no one to call when the bank says no, every dollar you borrow sits different in your chest. Every contract you sign feels like a bet you can't afford to lose. I carried that weight for 4 decades, and I carried it alone because that's what fathers do. You carry it so your children don't have to. 2 years ago, I handed my son Alaric the CEO title. He was 30. Ready, I thought. He'd worked in the business since college, knew the operations, had ideas about expansion and modernization. Good ideas, some of them. He wanted to take Brooks MedTech into new markets, digital integration, contract manufacturing for startups. I sat across from him in my office, my old office soon to be his, and I told him I was proud. That he'd earned this. That the company was his now. And I meant it. What I didn't tell him, what I didn't think mattered at the time, was what I kept for myself. The patents. All 3 core product lines. The diagnostic calibration system, the surgical monitoring array, the sterile field technology that made our instruments the standard in regional hospitals. Those patents were mine, registered in my name. 100% ownership, not the company's. Mine. When I developed them decades back, I'd kept them separate for legal protection. Liability reasons. If the company ever faced a lawsuit, the intellectual property would be shielded. It was smart business, the kind of thing you do when you're building something from nothing and can't afford a single mistake to take it all down. I never transferred them. Not when we incorporated. Not when we brought on investors for the Series A expansion. Not when I made Alaric CEO. At the time, I told myself it was to protect him. If something went wrong, if he made a bad call or the market shifted, I could step back in. I could use those patents as leverage to steady the ship. Insurance, that's all. A father's failsafe. I didn't tell him because I didn't think it would matter. He was my son. I trusted him. And trust meant I didn't need to spell out every detail of who owned what. We were family. Family meant the lines blurred in all the right ways. Turned out I was wrong about that. Turned out the one detail I didn't mention. The fact that every product Brooks MedTech manufactured, every contract we signed, every dollar of revenue we generated, flowed from intellectual property I still owned. That detail mattered more than anything else I'd ever built. I believed in him too much to see what was already happening, that the money I poured into my children wasn't building gratitude. It was building entitlement. $7 million. And not once did my son tell anyone where that foundation came from. Alaric introduces himself at Chamber of Commerce events as a self-made entrepreneur. When someone asks what his parents do, he says the same thing every time: they retired a long time ago. Like Carolyn and I are sitting in some beachfront condo in Florida playing golf and forgetting we ever had children. The truth is, I've been tracking every dollar I've given him since he turned 22. Not out of spite. I just needed to know. Needed to see if there was a point where it would be enough. Where he'd stop needing and start standing. That point never came. The penthouse came first. Downtown Nashville, 18th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Cumberland. He showed me the listing when he was 26. Said it was an investment. That living in the right building meant access to the right people. I wrote the check for the down payment. $280,000. He never mentioned it was in my name as co-signer until the bank called 3 months later asking about late payments. Then the cars. The Mercedes first midnight blue leather interior, the kind of car that makes people look twice. He totaled it 14 months later. DUI, but the lawyer I paid for got it reduced to reckless driving. The Lexus that replaced it cost more. He said he needed something reliable for client meetings. I wrote that check too. When he took over as CEO, he needed capital for expansion, new equipment, contracts with regional hospital networks, digital infrastructure upgrades. I believed in the vision, believed in him, so I moved money, quietly, from my retirement accounts, from the reserves I'd built over 4 decades. I told myself it was an investment in the company, in his future. 300,000 the first round, 450 the second, another 600 when the contracts fell through, and he needed to cover payroll. You want to know what self-made means when you've never once had to wonder if the bank will say yes. But the part I didn't expect, the part that still sits wrong in my chest when I think about it, was the gambling. 3 separate times before he turned 30, Alaric came to me with debts that would have destroyed his credit. Casino debts, sports betting, high-stakes poker games in private rooms with people whose names I didn't recognize and didn't want to. The first time it was 42,000. He cried, said he'd made a mistake, that it would never happen again. I believed him. The second time, 8 months later, it was 73,000. He didn't cry that time, just handed me the paperwork and said he needed it handled quickly. Said the people he owed weren't patient. I handled it. The third time he didn't even ask, just texted me an account number and an amount. 112,000. I stared at that text for 20 minutes. Carolyn asked what was wrong. I told her it was work. I sent the money. $7 million, give or take. Penthouse. Cars. Business capital. Debts I covered because I didn't want to see my son's name in the kind of news that follows you forever. And every time someone asks what he does, he smiles and says he built it himself. Maybe he believes it. Maybe when you've never had to hear the word no, you forget someone was always saying yes behind you. My daughter, Tamara, 25 and unemployed, could recite every comeback schedule of her favorite idol group, but couldn't remember her own mother's birthday. $400,000 over the course of 10 years. I have the receipts. Concert tickets across 12 states. VIP packages that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Meet and greet events where she got 3 minutes and a photo with people whose names I still can't pronounce. International fan conventions, Seoul, Tokyo, Manila. Flights, hotels, limited edition merchandise that showed up in boxes at our door every other week. She has a room in our house. She still lives with us. Never moved out, lined wall to wall with posters. Shelves sagging under the weight of albums still in shrink wrap. Collectible dolls in glass cases. Photo cards organized in binders like some people organize family photos. Let me tell you what it feels like to love someone so much you'd fund a dream they never once thanked you for. Tamara can tell you down to the minute when the next album drops. She knows every member's birthday, their debut date, the exact timeline of their contract renewals. She's got alerts set on her phone. She's part of online communities with thousands of people who've never met, but speak the same language of devotion. But ask her when Carolyn and I got married and she'll guess. 30 years, 40, she's never been sure. Ask her when my birthday is, and she'll say something in the fall. Maybe October. She's been wrong every year since she turned 16. 8 years ago, Carolyn was hospitalized overnight for a heart condition, arrhythmia. The doctors said it was stress, probably nothing serious, but they wanted to monitor her. Tamara was 17. She was at a concert in Atlanta, VIP package. She'd been planning it for 6 months. We didn't call her. Didn't tell her until 3 days later when Carolyn was already home and the crisis had passed. She asked why we didn't say anything. Carolyn looked at me. I looked at the floor. The truth was, we knew. We knew it wouldn't matter enough for her to leave early. Wouldn't matter enough to miss the encore, the photo op, the moment she'd been counting down to for half a year. And we couldn't stand the idea of asking her to choose and watching her choose something else. So we didn't ask. $400,000, and she couldn't tell you when my birthday was. The first time I understood my son was lying to my face. He was wearing an $83,000 watch and smiling like a man who'd earned something. $83,000, self-rewarded, on my account. 6 months before everything fell apart, Alaric came over for dinner. Rare occasion. He'd been busy, he said. New contracts, expansion plans, the kind of schedule that leaves no time for parents who live 20 minutes away. Carolyn made pot roast. The one he used to ask for every birthday when he was a kid. He showed up 40 minutes late, apologized without looking up from his phone, and sat down like he was doing us a favor. Halfway through the meal, he rolled up his sleeve. Let the watch catch the light just right. Swiss made. Platinum case. The kind of timepiece that weighs more than physics says it should, like the metal knows it's expensive. Treated myself, he said, turning his wrist so we could see it better. Had a good quarter. I told him I was proud. Told him that's what success looks like, rewarding yourself for hard work. Told him his mother and I were happy to see him doing well. He smiled. Said the company was performing beyond projections. Said the client acquisitions under his leadership had exceeded targets by 18%. Said it felt good to finally see his strategy paying off. I believed every word. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing the monthly corporate reconciliations. Something I'd been doing for 40 years, habit more than necessity. Brooks MedTech had accountants for this. But old patterns die hard, and I still like to see where the money went. Buried in a stack of vendor invoices, I found it. $83,400. Luxury timepiece retailer. Nashville. Authorized account. My signature from 2 years ago, back when I was still CEO and Alaric was still learning the business. An account I'd told him to close when he took over. An account he'd forgotten existed. Or maybe he hadn't forgotten. Maybe he just hoped I wouldn't look. I stared at that invoice for 20 minutes. Carolyn came into the office, asked if I was coming to bed. I told her I'd be up soon. She looked at the paper in my hand, started to ask, then stopped. She knew. The way you know after 37 years of reading someone's face. You want to know what it feels like to realize your son's idea of treating himself is spending your money and telling you he earned it. It doesn't feel like anger. Not at first. It feels like standing on ground you thought was solid and feeling it shift. Like the foundation you built everything on was never concrete at all. Just sand. Just something that looked permanent because you needed it to be. I didn't call him. Didn't send an email asking for an explanation. I told myself maybe there was a reason. Maybe he'd planned to pay it back. Maybe it was an honest mistake, the kind of administrative oversight that happens when you're running a company and juggling 100 details at once. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. 4 months before everything collapsed. May, late spring, the kind of weather that makes Nashville feel almost kind. I stopped by Brooks MedTech unannounced. Had some documents Alaric needed to sign. Estate planning paperwork. Nothing urgent, but I thought I'd drop by, maybe take him to lunch. Father-son time. The kind we used to have before he got too busy to answer texts. Andrea Calloway, the receptionist I'd known for 8 years, hesitated when I asked to see my son. Something in her face I'd never seen before. A flicker of discomfort, maybe fear. He's in a meeting, Mr. Whitaker. She said, not quite meeting my eyes. It might be a while. I told her I could wait. Told her I wasn't in a hurry. She nodded, gestured to the leather chairs in the lobby, and went back to her computer. But her shoulders stayed tense. I sat down. Pulled out my phone. Checked emails. Watched employees walk through the lobby, people I'd hired, people who used to stop and chat, ask about Carolyn, tell me about their kids. Most of them nodded politely and kept walking. Like I was a stranger. Like I hadn't built the building they were standing in. 53 minutes. I counted every one of them. Because that's what fathers do when they don't know their own son is watching them wait and choosing not to care. The coffee in the lobby went from hot to cold to room temperature. Andrea kept glancing at me, then at her phone, then back at her screen. Around the 40-minute mark, she offered to check on the meeting. Came back 5 minutes later, said it was running long, maybe I should try calling ahead next time. I left the documents with her. told her to make sure Alaric got them. Drove home with the kind of heaviness that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. 6 months later, after Alaric had laid off half the staff to cover losses I didn't know about yet, one of the former employees called me. Guy named Rick worked in logistics for 12 years. He'd heard what happened. Wanted me to know he was sorry. Then he told me the rest. That day you came by back in May. He said, voice careful like he was stepping through a minefield. Your son saw you on the security monitor. Called down to Andrea, told her to stall you. Then he walked out the back exit. Waited in the parking lot until you left. I didn't say anything. Didn't trust my voice. I'm sorry, sir, Rick said. I thought you knew. I thought maybe you two had worked it out. I thanked him. Hung up. Sat in my office with the lights off and tried to understand what kind of man sees his own father waiting in a lobby and chooses a back door instead. I didn't know my wife was crying herself to sleep for 8 months straight, until the night she finally told me why. My wife sold her grandmother's jewelry to cover what our daughter stole, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to January, 8 months before everything collapsed. I was facing the worst cash crisis Brooks Medtech had seen in 20 years. A major contract fell through. Payment terms shifted. Suddenly, the money I'd counted on to make payroll was sitting in accounts receivable 90 days out, and 63 employees needed checks in 5 days. I could fix it. Move money from reserves, restructure some short-term debt, tighten the belt for a quarter. Nothing I hadn't done before, but it meant every dollar mattered. Every single one. That week, my daughter took $92,000 from the safe in my home office. The safe wasn't hidden, wasn't a secret. It was where I kept emergency cash, old habit from the early days when banks didn't always say yes fast enough. Carolyn knew the combination. The kids knew where it was. I told them it was for family emergencies only. Medical bills, crisis situations. The kind of thing you don't touch unless you have to. Tamara touched it for concert tickets. 3 cities, 3 consecutive nights. VIP packages for each one. First-class flights, hotels. The kind of weekend that costs more than most people make in a year. Carolyn caught her packing. 4 suitcases in the hallway, boarding passes, already printed, makeup spread across the bathroom counter. Where did you get the money? Carolyn asked. Tamara didn't even look up from her suitcase. The safe. And I borrowed your emergency card. I'll pay it back. Your father needs that money. The company is... money comes back, Tamara said, zipping the suitcase closed. A concert that's gone is gone forever. Carolyn told me this months later, when the weight of carrying it alone finally broke something inside her, and I could tell from the way her voice caught exactly what it had done to her. She stood in that hallway and watched our daughter walk out the door with enough money to save our employees' livelihoods, and she told me all she could think was that she'd raised someone who valued 3 hours of music more than 63 families' ability to pay rent. You want to know what it does to a man when his daughter looks him in the eye and tells him a 3-hour concert matters more than whether his employees get paid. It hollows you out, makes you wonder what you did wrong, what you failed to teach. What essential piece of humanity got lost somewhere between childhood and 25? But I didn't know any of this yet. Not in January. What I knew was that my accounts were short, and I needed to move fast. I sold some stock, restructured a loan, made payroll with 8 hours to spare. Told myself it was close, but we'd made it. What I didn't know was that Carolyn had gone to her jewelry box that same week. The pearl earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. White gold freshwater pearls, the kind of classic piece you wear to everything that matters. She wore them to Alaric's college graduation, to Tamara's high school ceremony, to every anniversary dinner for 27 years. The bracelet I'd given her the day Alaric was born. White gold, again delicate chain, tiny sapphire for his birthstone. She wore it every year on his birthday, called it her mama's bracelet. A few other pieces, things with history, things that meant something. She sold them to a jewelry buyer in Nashville, got $11,000, covered what Tamara had taken from the credit card, covered the overdraft fees, covered the hole our daughter had left. Never said a word to me. For 8 months, Carolyn wore different earrings to church, wore a different bracelet on Alaric's birthday. And when I asked her where the pearls were, she said she was trying something new, said she wanted a change. I believed her. 3 months before everything collapsed, June, early summer, the kind of heat that makes Nashville shimmer, my wife opened her jewelry box and found the necklace gone. Her grandmother's necklace. Some losses don't have a dollar amount attached. That necklace survived the Great Depression, crossed an ocean, outlived 2 generations. And it took my daughter 1 afternoon to trade it for autographs. Carolyn's mother had given it to her 2 weeks before she died. Lung cancer, 58 years old. Too young. The necklace was the only thing of value her mother owned. Antique gold, intricate filigree work, a small emerald in the center. The kind of piece you see in museums behind glass. Carolyn wore it twice a year, their anniversary, her mother's birthday. Otherwise, it stayed in the jewelry box, wrapped in the same silk cloth her grandmother had used. Until it didn't. Tamara sold it to a private collector. $4,000. Used the money for a VIP fan package. 3 hours with people who smiled for photos and forgot her name the moment she walked away. When Carolyn found it missing, she didn't scream, didn't call Tamara, didn't tell me. She just cried. I found her sitting on the edge of our bed jewelry box, open the empty silk cloth in her hands. Tears running down her face in silence. The kind of crying that doesn't make sound because the grief is too deep for noise. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked at me, wiped her face, folded the silk cloth and put it back in the box. "I'm fine," she said. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. It wasn't until months later, after everything else had fallen apart, that she told me the truth. Told me about the necklace, about the jewelry she'd sold to cover Tamara's theft, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep while I slept beside her oblivious. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because you were already carrying so much," she said. "I thought if I could just fix it quietly, you wouldn't have to carry this too." That necklace was irreplaceable, and my daughter traded it for a 3-hour concert. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late September, and if I'd known what the next 72 hours would cost me, I would have burned it instead of opening it. 30 seconds. That's all I needed for the verification. The envelope was official. Bank letterhead. Standard renewal notice for the personal guarantee I'd co-signed 2 years earlier when Alaric needed expansion capital. $2 million line of credit. The kind of number that looks different when it's printed on paper than it does when you're just talking about business growth over coffee. 5-day deadline to renew. Routine paperwork. I'd signed it before without thinking twice, but this time, something in the revenue projections looked off. Not wrong exactly, just different from the quarterly reports I'd been seeing. A detail about client retention rates that didn't match the last board summary Alaric had sent me. Probably nothing. Probably just different accounting periods or a reclassification I wasn't tracking. But when you're guaranteeing $2 million, you verify. Even the small things. Especially the small things. I pulled out my phone, leaned back in my office chair half watching through the glass wall as one of our technicians recalibrated an ultrasound probe. The familiar hum of the equipment. The quiet rhythm of a Tuesday afternoon at Brooks MedTech. Everything normal. Everything fine. I dialed Alaric, straight to voicemail. Not unusual. He was CEO. Meetings client calls the constant juggling act of running a growing company. I'd lived that life for 40 years. I understood. "Hey, it's Dad," I said after the beep. Got the renewal paperwork here for the guarantee. Need to verify something with you before I sign it. Call me back when you get a second. No big deal. I hung up, went back to reviewing the letter. The details still nagged at me, but it could wait an hour, 2 hours. However long it took for Alaric to surface from whatever meeting had his phone turned off. An hour passed. No call. I tried again. Voicemail. Tried Tamara, thinking maybe she'd know where her brother was. Maybe they were together. Maybe she could pass along a message. Voicemail. I left another message. Casual. Light. Hey, Tamara. Looking for your brother. If you talk to him, tell him to give me a call. Thanks, sweetheart. 2 hours became 4. 4 became 6. When your children don't call you back for 12 hours, that's normal. When your children don't call back and you're holding a $2 million guarantee with their future hanging on your signature. What's that? I told myself it was nothing. Busy day. Dead phones. The kind of coincidence that happens when everyone's moving too fast to check messages. But my hands kept reaching for my phone. Checking the screen. Making sure I hadn't missed a notification. Making sure the ringer was on. At 6:30, I drove home. Nashville traffic was thick, the kind that gives you too much time to think. I tried both numbers again at a red light. Voicemail. Voicemail. Carolyn was setting the table when I walked in. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. The kind of meal that usually makes the house smell like home. I couldn't smell anything. You're quiet, she said, watching me push food around my plate. I set down my fork. The kids aren't answering. What do you mean? I've been calling since 2 o'clock. Both of them. Straight to voicemail, every time. She set down her own fork. The little crease appeared between her eyebrows, the one that shows up when she's trying to decide if I'm overreacting. They're busy, Lester. They're grown adults with their own lives. I know. Alaric's running a company. Tamara's probably at some fan event. Their phones are probably dead or on silent or... And I know, I said again. She was right. I knew she was right. Adults don't check in with their parents every few hours. They don't answer every call. They have jobs and friends and schedules that don't revolve around whether their father needs 30 seconds of their time. Logically, I knew all of this. So why did my stomach feel like it was folding in on itself? How long has it been? Carolyn asked, softer now. Since 2, so 4.5 hours. That's nothing. That's a normal afternoon. I know, but knowing didn't stop my chest from tightening. Didn't stop the cold weight settling in my gut. Didn't stop my brain from cycling through every possible reason 2 adult children would both go silent at the same time. Carolyn reached across the table, took my hand. They're fine. They're just busy. I nodded, squeezed her hand back, tried to eat. The food tasted like cardboard. After dinner, I tried again. Both phones. Voicemail. Voicemail. 7 o'clock became 8. 8 became 9. I sat in my office, staring at the guarantee letter phone on the desk beside it, willing it to ring, willing the screen to light up with Alaric's name, with Tamara's name, with anyone who could tell me I was being ridiculous. You only understand what silence does to an orphan when you've been one. It doesn't whisper. It screams. When you grow up with no one. When you spend your childhood in a building full of kids who all know what it means to be forgotten, you learn that silence is the sound of abandonment. That unreachable means unwanted. That when people don't answer, it's because you don't matter enough for them to pick up. I'd spent 40 years teaching myself that wasn't true. That I had a family. That I had people who would answer when I called. That I'd never be that 7-year-old boy again, waiting by a phone that never rang with news of parents who were never coming. But here I was, 69 years old, sitting in a house I'd built with my own hands, staring at a phone, waiting. At 10 o'clock, Carolyn came to the office door. Come to bed, she said. Soon. Lester, I just want to wait a little longer, in case they call. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Don't stay up all night. I stayed up all night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling phone on the nightstand 6 inches from my head. Every few minutes I'd check the screen, make sure it was still on, make sure I hadn't somehow missed a call. Nothing. Carolyn was right. I knew she was right. Adults don't answer every call. This was normal. This was fine. So why did my chest feel like something inside had already started to understand? By noon on day 2, I'd stopped pretending this was normal and started calling hospitals. No accidents reported, no hospital admissions. Which meant either they were fine or whatever had happened to them hadn't been found yet. I called Alaric 5 more times by 10 in the morning. Tamara 3 times. Every single call died in a voicemail box that might as well have been a black hole. At 11, I stopped trying their cell phones and started trying everything else. University Medical Center in Las Vegas. The woman who answered sounded tired, like she'd been answering the same questions for 12 hours straight. I'm looking for admission records, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. 2 names? Alaric Whitaker, 32. Tamara Whitaker, 25. Keyboard clicking. Long pause. No records under either name in the last 72 hours, sir. Are you sure? Can you check again? Another pause. I've checked. Neither name appears in our system. I thanked her. Hung up. Dialed Sunrise Hospital. Same script, same answer, nothing. Spring Valley Hospital. Desert Springs. Southern Hills. I worked my way through every emergency room in Las Vegas, voice getting tighter with each call, hands shaking by the 4th hospital. Nothing. 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 Around 1 in the afternoon, I called the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police non-emergency line. The operator listened patiently while I explained 2 adult children, both unreachable for over 24 hours, now last known location, Las Vegas. Have there been any accidents reported? I asked. Any incidents involving either name? More keyboard clicking. No accidents reported under those names in the last 48 hours, sir. I gripped the phone harder. Are you certain? Yes, sir. Have you tried just calling them? I almost laughed. Would have if my throat hadn't been so tight. Yes, I said. I've tried that. I called 3 of Alaric's business contacts. People I'd met at chamber events whose cards I'd kept in my desk drawer just in case. Nobody had heard from him. One said he thought Alaric was traveling. Another said he'd been out of the office all week. Traveling where? Out of the office for what? Nobody knew. I called 2 of Tamara's friends. Numbers I'd gotten from Carolyn girls I'd met once or twice at family dinners years ago. One didn't answer. The other said she hadn't talked to Tamara in weeks. What does it mean when every hospital, every police station, every contact in your phone says the same thing? We don't know where your children are. It means you're alone. It means the silence isn't just in your head. It means whatever is happening or not happening is real enough that no institution in a city of 2 million people has any record of the 2 human beings you spent your entire life building a world around. By 4 in the afternoon, I was sitting at my desk at Brooks MedTech, staring at a notepad filled with names and numbers and the word nothing written in capital letters at the bottom. Carolyn called around 5. Have you heard anything? Her voice was thin, stretched. No. Lester, it's been 27 hours. I know. Where are they? I don't know. Silence on the line. Then, come home, please. I went home, sat through dinner without tasting anything. Tried their phones again at 7, 8, 9, 10. Voicemail. 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 At midnight, Carolyn went to bed. I told her I'd be up soon. I lied. At 2 in the morning, I was sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone like it was a bomb that refused to detonate. Carolyn was asleep beside me, breathing soft and steady the way she always does, the kind of sleep that comes from 37 years of trusting the world won't collapse overnight. I used to sleep like that, before I learned that sometimes the world does collapse. Sometimes the people you count on just disappear, and no one bothers to tell you why. You only understand what silence does to an orphan when you've been one. It doesn't whisper. It screams in a frequency only you can hear. I was 7 years old when I stopped asking where my parents were. 7 when I understood that some questions don't have answers, that some people leave and don't come back, and nobody explains why. You just wake up one day, and you're alone, and that's the rest of your life. The orphanage had a phone, one phone for 18 kids. It sat in the hallway outside the director's office, black rotary dial cord that barely stretched to the wall. I used to walk past it every day on the way to the dormitory. Sometimes I'd stop, put my hand on the receiver, wonder who I'd call if I had someone to call, wonder what it felt like to have a number memorized that would connect you to a voice that cared whether you were scared or hungry, or just needed to hear someone say your name like it mattered. I never picked it up, because I knew. Even at 7, I knew. There was nobody on the other end. That's the thing about being an orphan. It's not the absence of parents. It's the absence of anyone who has to answer when you call. It's understanding bone deep, soul deep, that you could disappear tomorrow, and the world would keep turning, and nobody would stop to ask where you went. I spent 40 years making sure my children never felt that. 40 years building something permanent, something solid, something that would always, always answer when they called. And here I was, 69 years old, a company worth $52 million, a wife sleeping beside me, a house I'd built with my own hands, every single thing I'd promised myself I'd create. And I was drowning in the exact same terror. Except this time I was the one nobody answered for. I was the one calling into the void. I was the one sitting in the dark, gripping a phone, trying to understand what it means when the people you built your entire life around act like you don't exist. At 2 in the morning, I wasn't 69 anymore. I was 7 and terrified. By 4 in the morning, on day 3, I stopped waiting for the phone to ring and started moving. I'd been sitting on the edge of the bed for 2 hours. Carolyn had stirred around 3, reached for me in the dark, found empty space. I heard her get up, heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the kitchen light click on. I followed her down. She was sitting at the kitchen table staring at her own phone, tears running down her face. No sound. Just water tracking down her cheeks like they'd been doing it for hours, and her face had stopped noticing. "Carolyn!" She looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than tears usually reach. "I tried calling them again," she whispered. "Both of them. I thought maybe if I—" Her voice broke. I crossed the kitchen, put my hand on her shoulder. Felt her shaking. "To pack a bag," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Sounded like someone else using my throat. "We're flying to Las Vegas. Something is wrong. I can feel it." She didn't ask if I was sure. Didn't tell me I was overreacting. Didn't suggest we wait another day, give them more time, maybe they'd call by morning. She just stood up, wiped her face with both hands. Looked at me with eyes that had already been to the worst places a parent's mind can go. "I'll get our things," she said. I pulled out my phone, opened the airline app with fingers that didn't want to cooperate. First flight out of Nashville to Las Vegas, 6:45 a.m., 2.5 hours from now. 2 seats available. I booked them. Didn't look at the price. Didn't care. Confirmation email lit up my screen. Gate C12. Boarding at 6:15. Carolyn was already upstairs. I heard drawers opening, the closet door, the sound of a suitcase being pulled from the top shelf. I stood in the kitchen, phone in my hand, trying to remember the last time I'd flown somewhere without planning it weeks in advance. Trying to remember the last time I'd done anything this impulsive, this desperate, this convinced that if I didn't move right now, something irreversible would happen. I couldn't remember, because I'd never felt like this before. Not when the company almost went under in 2008. Not when Carolyn had the heart scare. Not even when I was 17 and leaving the orphanage with nothing but $200 and a promise to myself that I'd build something permanent. This was different. This was the terror you feel when the permanent thing you built is dissolving and you can't see how and you can't stop it, and all you can do is get on a plane and fly toward it, hoping you're not already too late. Let me tell you what 23 unanswered calls in 72 hours means to a parent. It means you've already started planning which funeral home to call. It means every time you close your eyes, you see accident scenes, hospital rooms, worst-case scenarios your brain won't let you stop imagining. It means you're not flying to Las Vegas to find your children. You're flying to find out if they're still alive. I went upstairs, found Carolyn in our bedroom moving on autopilot. Underwear, socks, shirts she wasn't looking at, just grabbing and folding. Her suitcase open on the bed, like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever normal life we had left. I pulled my own bag from the closet, started packing, jeans, t-shirts, toiletries. The motions felt mechanical, like my body knew what to do even though my brain had stopped processing anything beyond get to Las Vegas, find them, make sure they're breathing. "What do you think happened?" Carolyn asked. Her voice was small, the voice she uses when she's asking a question she doesn't want answered. I stopped folding a shirt, looked at her. "I don't know." "Do you think they're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," I said again. She zipped her suitcase halfway, stopped, stared at it. "They could just be busy," she said. Not like she believed it. Like she was testing the words to see if they'd hold any weight. "They could be fine. We could get there, and they could be perfectly fine, and then we'll have wasted a day and some money," I said. "And I'll take that. I'll take that every time if it means they're fine." She nodded, finished zipping the bag. That's the thing about 37 years of marriage. You learn which fights are worth having and which ones you just get up at 4 in the morning and pack a bag for. You learn when your partner is right, even if the decision makes no logical sense. You learn that sometimes love looks like booking a last-minute flight because your gut says something's wrong, and your gut has earned the right to be trusted. We were packed by 4:30, bags by the front door, house keys, wallets, phones fully charged. I looked at my phone one more time, dialed Alaric, voicemail, dialed Tamara, voicemail, 24 calls, 72 hours, not a single word. Carolyn stood beside me in the entryway, her suitcase at her feet. She was wearing jeans and the gray sweater I'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. Her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked older than I'd seen her look in years. "Are we really doing this?" she asked quietly. "Yes. What if we—" She stopped, swallowed, started again. "What if we get there and it's bad?" I took her hand, felt it trembling. "Then we'll handle it," I said. "Together." She squeezed my hand. Hard. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." We loaded the bags into the car, backed out of the driveway at 4:45 in the morning. Nashville was still dark, streets empty. The kind of quiet that belongs to a city that hasn't woken up yet to realize something's about to go very, very wrong. Carolyn's hands shook as she zipped her bag. Some thoughts are too heavy at 4 a.m. We didn't speak for the first 2 hours of the flight. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything we could say would make it real. The airport had been a blur. Security, gate C12, boarding pass scanned, window seats toward the back. I let Carolyn take the window, stared at the seat in front of me while the plane filled with business travelers and tourists and people whose biggest worry that morning was whether they'd packed enough sunscreen. We sat side by side without saying a word. Carolyn held my hand the entire time, staring out the window like the clouds might have an answer written in them somewhere. I tried not to think. Tried to focus on the hum of the engines, the recycled air, the flight attendant's safety demonstration I'd heard 100 times before. But my brain wouldn't stop. Car accident. Emergency room, police station, bodies in the morgue waiting to be identified. I kept seeing it. Kept cycling through every disaster scenario my mind could manufacture. Alaric's car wrapped around a barrier on I-15. Tamara unconscious in a hospital bed somewhere, no ID, no way to contact us. Both of them in some situation so bad they couldn't reach a phone, even if they wanted to. Except hospitals have phones. Police stations have phones. Good Samaritans have phones. 72 hours, 24 calls, not one answer. What kind of emergency lasts 3 days and doesn't generate a single phone call? Somewhere over New Mexico, I could see the rust-colored landscape through Carolyn's window. I tried to remember something. When was the last time either of my children called me first? Not texted back, not returned a voicemail, not answered when I reached out, called me, initiated contact, picked up the phone because they wanted to hear my voice, wanted to tell me something, wanted to ask how I was doing. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to find that memory. What does it say about your relationship with your children when you can't remember a single time they called you just because they wanted to hear your voice? I fell asleep trying to find the answer. Woke up somewhere over the Nevada desert with Carolyn's hand still in mine and the memory still missing. Maybe there wasn't one to find. I thought about Alaric at 6 years old learning to ride a bike in our driveway. How many times he fell. How many times I picked him up, told him to try again, held the back of the seat until he found his balance. The day he made it all the way to the end of the block, without my hand. How he'd turned around with the biggest smile I'd ever seen and yelled, "Dad, did you see that?" I'd seen it. I'd been watching the whole time. I thought about Tamara at 8, begging us to take her to her first concert. Some children's performer I'd never heard of. We'd sat in a community center auditorium on folding chairs, Tamara between us, singing every word. She'd grabbed both our hands during the finale, bouncing in her seat, looking up at us like we'd given her the world. When did those children become the ones who wouldn't answer my calls? The plane touched down just after 2 in the afternoon Vegas time. We grabbed our bags from overhead, followed the crowd through the terminal. Neither of us had been to Las Vegas in 20 years. It felt louder than I remembered. Brighter. Slot machines dinging in the airport. Advertisements for shows I'd never heard of. People in shorts and sandals pulling wheeled suitcases toward destinations that probably didn't include checking whether their children were still alive. I had the address from Alaric's business calendar, the one his assistant had sent me 6 months ago when I'd asked where to forward some tax documents. A hotel on the Strip. I'd assumed it was where he was staying for a work trip. We caught a cab outside baggage claim, gave the driver the address, sat in the back seat holding hands again, watching Las Vegas scroll past the windows. There's a particular kind of humiliation that comes from standing in wrinkled airport clothes in a room full of people who look like they've never had to choose between elegance and urgency. The hotel lobby hit us like a wall. Chandeliers, marble floors polished to mirrors, fresh flower arrangements the size of small trees, a piano somewhere playing something classical notes echoing off surfaces that probably cost more per square foot than my first house. People in evening wear, cocktail dresses, pressed suits, laughter that sounded expensive. The kind of crowd that belonged in a place like this. We stood just inside the entrance, still holding our overnight bags. I was still wearing the shirt I'd thrown on at 4 in the morning. Carolyn's sweater had a coffee stain on the sleeve from the airport. The address from Alaric's business calendar didn't lead us to a hospital. It led us to one of those hotels that costs more per night than most people make in a month. Music, fresh flowers, laughter. People gliding through a lobby that looked like it belonged in a movie we couldn't afford tickets to. For 1 second, exactly 1 second, relief hit me so hard, my knees nearly buckled. Thank God. They're okay. They're not dead. They're not dying. They're not in a morgue or a hospital or a police station. They're here. They're fine. 1 second of pure, overwhelming relief. Then my eyes adjusted to the light. Balloons, gold and white, clustered near a set of double doors to the left of the lobby. A champagne tower on a table just visible through the entrance. Flower arrangements that cost more than my first car. A banner I couldn't quite read from where we stood. Music. Not just ambient piano, celebration music. The kind that goes with toasts and dancing and people dressed like they were going somewhere important. This wasn't a hospital. This wasn't an emergency. This was a party. Carolyn saw it the same moment I did. I felt her hand tighten on mine. "Lester," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Relief hit me for 1 second. Then I saw the balloons. This wasn't an emergency. This was a celebration. I walked into a ballroom, holding over 100 people celebrating my son's engagement. An engagement I didn't know existed. At a party I was never invited to. Funded by money he'd begged from me a month ago for business expansion. 100 people, open bar, live music. The man who asked me for money last month. Crystal chandeliers. A live band in the corner playing something upbeat. Tables draped in white linen. Centerpieces that probably cost more than most people spend on their entire wedding. An open bar with 3 bartenders working non-stop. A champagne tower catching the light like it was designed to be photographed. Guests in evening wear. Designer dresses, tailored suits. The kind of crowd that knew how to hold a champagne flute and make small talk look effortless. And there in the corner, Tamara. Phone held high. Live streaming. Smiling at the camera like she was showing her followers what success looked like. Then I saw him, Alaric, drink in hand. Surrounded by people laughing at something he'd just said. He looked up. Saw me. Saw Carolyn. His face went from surprise to something colder in less than a second. He excused himself from his group. Walked toward us. Not hurried. Not concerned. Just irritated. "What are you doing here?" Not "Dad." Not "Is everything okay?" Not "I'm sorry you were worried." Just, "What are you doing here?" Like we were door-to-door salesmen he needed to politely dismiss. My throat was so tight, I could barely speak. "Yeah, and we've been calling you for 3 days, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Both of you, 24 calls, not a single answer. We thought—" I couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words out loud. Couldn't tell him about the hospitals, the police stations, the nights I'd spent convinced he was dead. "We thought something happened," Carolyn said. Her voice was shaking. "We flew here because we thought you were hurt. We thought—" I saw the calls," Alaric said. His voice was completely flat. "I just didn't want to answer. You both need to learn to let us live our own lives." The ballroom didn't stop. Music kept playing. People kept laughing. Glasses kept clinking. But something inside me stopped working. "You saw the calls," I repeated. "Yeah, I saw them. And you chose not to answer." The "I chose," he said each word precise, "not to engage." This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't just show up uninvited and— Uninvited! Carolyn's voice cracked. "This is your engagement party, and we weren't invited." Bliss Donovan stepped up beside my son, 28 and clearly accustomed to being the center of attention. Wearing a ring I'd never seen. A smile that was all edges. She looked us up and down. My wrinkled shirt from 4 in the morning. Carolyn's travel-worn jacket. The bags we were still holding because we'd come straight from the airport thinking our children might be dying. "You both look like you drove the valet cars," she said, loud enough for the nearest 20 people to hear. Laughter, not from everyone, but enough. "Let me tell you what it feels like when your son looks you in the eye and tells you he watched you suffer for 3 days on purpose. Not by accident. Not because he was busy, but because he wanted you to learn a lesson. It feels like drowning on dry land. Tamara appeared beside Alaric, phone still in her hand, still recording. This generation doesn't live the way you do anymore, she said to the camera, then looked at us. You have to learn boundaries. Carolyn made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Something between a sob and a gasp. Boundaries, she whispered. We thought you were dead. Huh, that's dramatic, Tamara said, rolling her eyes. We're adults. We don't have to check in every 5 minutes. It was 3 days, I said. My voice was rising. I couldn't stop it. 72 hours. We called hospitals. We called police. Exactly, Alaric said. That's the problem. You're too involved. This is why we didn't invite you. We knew you'd make it about you. A man approached. Late 50s. Expensive suit. The kind of confidence that comes from never having to wonder if the bank will say yes. Dexter Donovan, Bliss's father. 58 and carrying himself like a man used to buying his way out of uncomfortable conversations. He smiled, the kind of smile that isn't one. Everything all right here? He asked, looking at me and Carolyn like we were a problem his money could solve. Fine, Alaric said. They were just leaving. Good, Dexter said. He put a hand on Alaric's shoulder, looked at me. My daughter deserves someone successful, someone who understands what it takes to build a real future. I'd built a company worth $52 million. I'd built it from nothing, from a garage and a prayer and 40 years of 18-hour days. This man didn't know that. Because my son had never told him. Carolyn was crying now. Not quietly. The kind of crying that makes people stop talking and look. 100 people watched my wife cry in the middle of a ballroom. And not one of them knew we were the reason any of them were standing there. Alaric walked to the front of the room, tapped a microphone. The band stopped playing. Thank you all for coming, he said, smiling, confident, the kind of speech he'd probably practiced. This means the world to me and Bliss. I want to thank our incredible friends for supporting us, the business partners who've made this journey possible, and especially Bliss's family Dexter and Margaret for welcoming me with open arms. Applause. Cheers. Dexter Donovan raising his glass. Alaric went on. Thanked 3 people by name. Thanked the venue. Thanked the band. Never once said my name. Never once mentioned Carolyn. 100 people watched my wife cry, and my son thanked everyone except us. I didn't scream, didn't break down, didn't make a scene. I just took my wife's hand and led her out of that ballroom. And inside me, something quieter than anger began to form. I didn't say a word the whole drive. Everything I needed to say was translating into something quieter. We walked through the lobby, past the chandeliers and the marble floors and the people in evening wear who had no idea they'd just witnessed something break. Out through the glass doors into Las Vegas heat that felt like walking into an oven. I raised my hand. A taxi pulled up. I opened the door for Carolyn. She climbed in without looking at me. I followed. Airport, I told the driver. Carolyn wept beside me. Not the loud kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere beneath your ribs. The kind that doesn't need sound because the pain is already louder than anything your voice could make. I stared out the window. Watched the strip fade into ordinary streets. Watched the lights give way to darkness. Watched Las Vegas become just another city in the rearview mirror. I hadn't said a single word since we left the ballroom. Not because I couldn't. Because everything I needed to say was already translating itself into something that didn't require words. Something that needed quiet to take its proper shape. Silence isn't always the absence of words. Sometimes it's the presence of something forming. something that needs quiet to take its proper shape. We made it through security, found our gate, sat in chairs bolted to the floor and waited for our flight to board. Carolyn stared at her hands. I stared at nothing. A family sat across from us. 2 parents, 2 kids. The father was helping the younger one with a puzzle on a tablet. The mother was braiding the older daughter's hair. Normal. Easy. The kind of family moment I'd thought we'd had 1,000 times. Maybe we never did. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention to what was actually there. Our flight boarded at 8:15. We found our seats near the back. Window and middle. I let Carolyn have the window again. She pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. The plane took off, climbed through the darkness, leveled out somewhere above the desert. I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then somewhere over New Mexico, she spoke. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the engine hum. "About the necklace, and the jewelry, and everything I've been hiding from you for 8 months. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were red, swollen. She looked older than I'd ever seen her look. "Okay," I said. She took a breath. Let it out slow. "The necklace," she said. "My grandmother's necklace, the one my mother left me. Tamara didn't lose it. She sold it. To a private collector. $4,000 for a VIP fan package. 3 hours with people who wouldn't remember her name by morning." I didn't say anything, just listened. "And the jewelry," she continued. "The pearl earrings you gave me for our 10th anniversary. The bracelet from when Alaric was born. A few other pieces. I sold them. Got $11,000. Used it to cover what Tamara took from the safe. The money you needed for payroll." Her voice was shaking now. "See, 8 months," she said. "I've been carrying this for 8 months. Every time you asked where the pearls were, every time you noticed something missing, I lied. I told you I wanted a change. I told you I was trying something new. I lied because—" She stopped, wiped her face with both hands. "Because why?" I asked quietly. "Because I didn't want you to know how bad it was," she said. "Because I thought if I could just fix it quietly, you wouldn't have to carry it too. You were already carrying so much. The company, the stress trying to help them build their lives. I thought—" She broke. Really broke. The kind of crying that shakes your whole body. You want to know what it does to a man when he realizes his wife has been carrying wounds alone because she was trying to protect him from the truth he wasn't ready to see. It breaks something that can't be fixed. I put my arm around her. She leaned into me, cried into my shoulder while the plane hummed through darkness and strangers slept around us, and the life we thought we'd built kept dissolving into something we didn't recognize. "I should have told you," she whispered. "I should have told you the first time. The first time she took something. The first time he looked at you like you were just a checkbook. I should have said something, but I kept thinking." "Thinking what?" I asked. She pulled back, looked at me with eyes that had seen this coming long before I did. "That maybe I was wrong," she said. "That maybe they were just going through a phase. That maybe if I just gave them more time, more grace, more chances, they'd remember. They'd remember what it felt like to be a family. They'd remember that we loved them, that we'd always loved them." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "But they didn't remember," she said. "Or maybe they just didn't care." I sat there holding my wife's hand at 30,000 feet and tried to find words for what I was feeling. Tried to find language for the thing that had been forming in the silence since we walked out of that ballroom. I couldn't, so I asked the only question I had left. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. "After everything, after Vegas, after watching what they did today. Why didn't you tell me before?" She looked at me, tears still wet on her face. 37 years of marriage in her eyes. Because I was still hoping I was wrong about them, she said. 7 words, everything. We stepped into our house near midnight. The silence hit us different than it ever had before, like it had been waiting for us to finally understand what it had been trying to say all along. We walked into our house, 28 years in those rooms. Countless nights coming home from Little League games, school, plays, every ordinary moment that used to fill this place with noise and chaos and the kind of mess that comes from raising children who actually live there. Now it was just quiet. Carolyn made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees just gave out. She collapsed onto the rug, the kind of weeping that has no voice. The living room rug, the one her mother gave us as a wedding gift. Hand-woven. Probably cost more than our first month's rent. We'd kept it pristine for 37 years, moved it from house to house, never let the kids play on it with anything that might stain. And now my wife was lying on it crying the way you cry when someone dies. Not the composed crying you do in hallways in front of strangers. Not the quiet tears that come when you're trying to hold it together because you have to. The real thing. The kind that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. The kind that makes sounds you didn't know a human body could make. I got down on the floor with her. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell her it would be okay. Didn't offer empty promises about how this would all work out somehow. I just held her. 28 years of marriage. I've seen my wife cry plenty of times. When her mother passed. When we thought we might lose the company in 2008. When Alaric got his acceptance letter to college, and we realized our baby was leaving. But I had never seen her cry like that. Silent and hollow. Like something inside her had simply stopped working. We stayed on that floor for over an hour, maybe longer. Time stopped making sense somewhere around the moment my wife's legs stopped holding her up. Eventually the crying slowed, turned into shallow breathing, then just exhaustion. "Come on," I said quietly. "Let's go to the kitchen." I helped her up. We moved to the kitchen table, the same one where we'd sat 3 nights ago, worried sick, convinced our children were dying. Except now we weren't worrying anymore. Now we knew. We sat across from each other. 2 mugs of coffee neither of us would drink. The clock on the wall said 12:47. "Where did we go wrong?" I asked her. My voice sounded strange, flat, like I was asking about the weather. I gave them everything I never had. I continued. I was there for every moment, every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference. I built a company so they'd never have to wonder where their next meal came from. I was the father I always wished for. And somehow I turned them into people who look at me like I'm the enemy. Carolyn wiped her face with both hands, looked at me with eyes that had cried themselves empty. "No," she said. Her voice was rough, raw. "You didn't turn them into anything? They did that themselves. I gave them too much. You gave them everything," she said. "And that was the problem. You handed them a life they never had to work for. And people who never work for something never learn to be grateful for it." I stared at her. "How you gave them money," she continued, "and safety, and every opportunity. And they took it all and never once stopped to think about where it came from. Because why would they? It was always just there. Like air. Like they were entitled to it just by existing." She leaned forward. "You wanted to give them what you never had," she said. "And you did. But what you never had, what made you who you are, wasn't just money or opportunity. It was hunger. It was knowing what it felt like to have nothing and deciding you'd never feel that way again. You want to know when the shift happened, when I stopped being a father, trying to win his children back, and became a man deciding what came next. It was sitting at that kitchen table listening to my wife explain what I'd spent 69 years refusing to see. "Our children have never been hungry a day in their lives," Carolyn said. "And I don't mean for food. I mean hungry for anything. Hungry to prove themselves. Hungry to build something. hungry to be someone other than the people their father's money turned them into. The clock ticked. 1 in the morning. 2. 3. We talked about everything. Every moment we'd missed. Every warning sign we'd ignored. Every time we'd told ourselves it was just a phase, just youth, just the normal friction between parents and adult children. Every lie we'd believed because the truth was too hard to face. "What do we do?" I asked, as the sky started turning gray outside the kitchen window. Carolyn looked at me. 37 years of marriage in that look. 37 years of knowing exactly what I was thinking before I said it. "We stop pretending," she said. "We stop hoping they'll change. We stop carrying wounds they don't even know they're inflicting. We stop being the safety net they take for granted. And then what? Then we let them find out what it feels like," she said. "What it feels like when the money stops, when the guarantees disappear, when the safety net isn't there anymore." She reached across the table, took my hand. "Chana, we let them learn what hunger feels like," she said. "The way you learned it, the hard way." The sun was coming through the kitchen window. First light. The kind of dawn that feels like a beginning, even when you know it's actually an ending. "Okay," I said. One word, everything. By first light, we were aligned. And when we're aligned, there is nothing quiet about what comes next. I found the group chat by accident. Carolyn's phone left open on the kitchen counter. A notification glowing on the screen. 3 days of hell reduced to screenshots and laughing emojis. 3 days? Hospitals? Police? And my children were screenshotting my calls and laughing. Friday morning. The sun was up, but I hadn't slept. Carolyn was in the shower. I was making coffee when I saw her phone light up on the counter. A notification. "Alaric Whitaker added you to family updates." Family updates? I picked up the phone, swiped. The group chat opened. 3 people: Alaric, Tamara, Bliss. I scrolled up. Started reading from the beginning. Tuesday afternoon, the day I sent my first call. Screenshot of my missed call. Timestamp 2:14 p.m. Bliss Donovan. "Let's see if the old folks actually fly out." She'd added a laughing emoji. "Alaric, just ignore it. They need to learn." Tamara had just replied with a row of laughing emojis. I kept scrolling. Tuesday evening, screenshot of my voicemail notification. Alaric. He left another one. Bliss, how many is that? Tamara, like 8 LOL. Wednesday morning. Screenshot of Carolyn's missed calls. Tamara. Mom's calling now too. Alaric. Don't answer. Seriously. They have to learn boundaries. Bliss. This is honestly kind of satisfying to watch. Wednesday afternoon. Screenshot of my call to the Las Vegas police non-emergency line. Somehow they knew. Somehow they'd been tracking. Tamara, OMG, he called the police. A skull emoji like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Bliss. No way. Alaric, let him. Maybe he'll finally get the message. I stood in my kitchen holding my wife's phone, reading message after message, screenshot after screenshot, every frantic call I'd made, every voicemail, every moment I'd spent convinced they were dying. Documented, mocked, turned into entertainment for a 3-person group chat. Let me tell you what it does to a man when he discovers his children turned his worst 3 days into a group chat punchline. Not by accident, not in anger, but as planned entertainment. It doesn't make you rage, it makes you cold. Thursday, the day we flew out. Bliss. They're actually coming. 3 laughing emojis in a row. Tamara, I can't believe this. Alaric. I told you they would. This is exactly what I'm talking about. No boundaries, No respect for our independence. Bliss. What are you going to say when they show up, Alaric? That they're embarrassing themselves. That this is why we didn't invite them. Tamara, film it lol. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. From something colder than that. Something that had been forming since we walked out of that ballroom and was now crystallizing into something I could actually use. Carolyn came into the kitchen, hair still wet, saw her phone in my hand. "What's wrong?" she asked. I handed her the phone without saying anything. She read. I watched her face change, watched the color drain, watched her eyes go from confused to horrified to something I'd never seen before. "They knew," she whispered. "The whole time. They knew we were terrified, and they—" Her voice broke. Before I show you what I found next on her social media comment. A. If you think I should confront them immediately. B. If I should stay silent and act strategically, add one reason why in 5 to 10 words. A quick note, some details ahead are recreated for storytelling impact, but the emotional truth is what matters. I took the phone back from Carolyn, opened a browser, typed in Tamara's social media handle, the one I'd seen on her business cards, the one she'd asked me to follow 100 times so she could boost her numbers. I found her profile, clicked on her story, posted 18 hours ago. Still up, still public. There we were, my wife and I, standing in that hotel lobby, looking exactly like two people who'd just had their hearts ripped out and handed back to them in pieces. She'd filmed us, secretly, from across the lobby while we stood there trying to process what we'd walked into. The video was maybe 10 seconds long, just long enough to catch Carolyn's face crumpling, just long enough to show me putting my arm around her, just long enough to make us look completely pathetic. The caption, "Some people never learn when to let go," followed by a skull emoji. I scrolled down, read the comments. 3,000 views, 416 comments. Yikes. This is so cringe. Boundaries exist for a reason. Your parents look like they need therapy, lol. I'm so glad my parents aren't like this. Row after row of skull emojis. Comment after comment. Strangers. People who had never met us. Would never meet us. Laughing at a 10-second video of my wife crying in a hotel lobby. 1,000 people laughed at a video of my wife crying. And the person holding the camera, the person who turned her mother's pain into content for her followers, was the child Carolyn stayed up 3 nights nursing through pneumonia when she was 4 years old. I sat down at the kitchen table, still holding the phone, still staring at that video, at the comments, at the number that kept climbing. 3,100 views now. Carolyn was standing behind me, looking over my shoulder. I heard her make a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob, something in between. "Hi, she posted us," Carolyn whispered. "She filmed us and posted us and—" She couldn't finish. I closed the browser, set the phone down, looked at my wife. "But this wasn't thoughtlessness," I said. My voice sounded strange. Calm. Too calm. This wasn't youthful rebellion or a misunderstanding or a phase they're going through. Carolyn nodded, tears running down her face. "This was deliberate," I continued. "This was planned. This was cruelty with a follower count." I stood up, walked to my office, pulled out my laptop. "What are you doing?" Carolyn asked from the doorway. "What we should have done years ago," I said. 1,000 people laughed at my wife crying. The person who filmed it was the child Carolyn nursed through pneumonia. The worst email I ever read wasn't meant for me. My son sent it to the wrong address. And in 17 words, I saw exactly what the next 10 years of my life were supposed to look like. I was still at my desk, still going through emails, looking for I don't know what. Evidence, patterns, something to make sense of what I'd just seen in that group chat and on that social media post. Then I saw it. Subject line timeline discussion. From Alaric Whitaker to admin at brooksmedtech.com. Not to Bliss's private email. To the general company address. The one that forwards to accounting, HR, and management. The one he'd typed 100 times, but apparently misremembered this once. Timestamped 2 weeks before the Vegas party. I opened it. After the wedding, we'll start slowly cutting them out. No big fight. Just less and less until it's clean. They won't even notice until it's too late to fix. You were right. Clean breaks are easier when they think it's their idea. 17 words. I read it 3 times. Not an angry text sent in the heat of an argument. Not a thoughtless comment made in frustration. A written, documented plan sent to his fiancée, with a timeline, with strategy. Cutting us out wasn't something that would happen. It was something they'd scheduled. I clicked print. Watched the paper slide out of the printer. Folded it once. Opened the top drawer of my desk. Placed it inside next to the corporate documents I'd been reviewing. Not because I needed to remember it. The words were already burned into my brain. But because I wanted it to exist somewhere outside of a screen. Somewhere real. Somewhere I could touch if I ever started to doubt what I'd seen. You want to know the difference between a mistake and a plan, a mistake you regret. A plan you schedule, document, and send to your fiancé with a timeline. I sat at that desk for another hour. Didn't read more emails. Didn't search for more evidence. Just sat there with my hands flat on the desk and let everything I'd learned in the past 24 hours settle into place. The group chat, the screenshots, the social media post, and now this. A written plan to erase us from their lives. Slowly. Cleanly. So we wouldn't even notice until it was too late to fix. Except I'd noticed, and it wasn't too late. It was exactly the right time. That evening, Carolyn and I sat on the back porch, the same porch where this whole thing started, where I'd sat 4 nights ago trying to figure out why my children weren't answering, where I'd convinced myself there had to be a good reason, where I'd told myself I was overreacting. We didn't say much. Just sat in the chairs we'd sat in 1,000 times before. Watched the sun go down over the backyard. Listened to the crickets start their evening song. I looked out at the yard. That's where Alaric learned to balance on 2 wheels. Right there between the oak tree and the fence. I ran beside him for 3 weeks, until one afternoon he just took off on his own. Turned around at the end of the driveway with the biggest smile I'd ever seen and yelled, "Dad, did you see that?" I'd seen it. I'd been watching the whole time, and over there under the oak tree. That's where Tamara used to make me read bedtime stories when she was little. Said the stories worked better outside. I'd sit on a blanket and read until my voice went hoarse, and the mosquitoes came out, and Carolyn would finally call us inside. I looked at those memories like I was looking at photographs of someone else's children, because that's what they were. Someone else's children, not mine. Mine wouldn't have done this. Some people say you can't let go of your children. They're wrong. You can. It just takes seeing them clearly enough to realize the people you're holding on to stopped existing years ago. "What are you thinking about?" Carolyn asked quietly. "I'm thinking about what comes next," I said. She nodded. Didn't ask me to explain. 37 years of marriage. She already knew. "The email," I said. "The one where he laid out the whole plan. After the wedding, slowly cut them out. Like we were weeds he needed to remove from his life." "I saw it," she said. "He made a mistake," I said. "Sent it to the wrong address. Otherwise, I never would have known. I would have just watched it happen over months, maybe years. Watched the calls get shorter, the visits get rarer. Watched them drift away so gradually, I wouldn't even realize it was deliberate until it was done." "But you do realize it," Carolyn said. "I do." She reached over, put her hand on mine. Whatever you decide, she said. I'm with you. 5 words. Not permission, not agreement, not advice, just presence. The only thing I needed. We sat there until the sun went all the way down and the automatic porch light clicked on. Until the September air turned cool enough that Carolyn pulled her cardigan tighter. Come on, I said finally. Let's go inside. We stood up, walked through the back door, locked it behind us. I looked back through the glass one more time. At the yard, at the oak tree, at the place where I'd taught my son to ride a bike. Those memories belonged to someone who didn't exist anymore. Maybe they never did. Maybe I just spent 40 years seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. But I saw clearly now. By the time we went to bed that night, I knew exactly what the next morning would bring. And I knew I wouldn't hesitate. At exactly 8:02 on Saturday morning, I picked up the phone and called the one man who could help me dismantle everything I'd spent 40 years building for my children. Desmond Kendrick picked up on the second ring. Lester, he said. 8 a.m. on a Saturday. You sound calm. That worries me more than if you were yelling. I need you to execute a series of actions, I said. Starting Monday. I'll need documentation prepared today. I'm listening. I looked at the notepad in front of me. 4 items, written in my own handwriting at 5:30 that morning while Carolyn still slept. Numbered 1 through 4, clear, precise. No room for misinterpretation. First, I said, I'm refusing to sign the renewal on the $2 million personal guarantee for Alaric's business line of credit. The deadline is Wednesday. Let it expire. Desmond didn't say anything. I heard him writing. Second. I continued. I want demand letters recharacterizing the money as loans. We have the emails and texts where both of them promised to pay me back. Formal 30-day demand for repayment backed by everything documented. $7 million total as of Monday. More writing, still no comment. Third, emergency board meeting at Brooks MedTech. I want to restructure the equity distribution and formalize the licensing agreements for the core patents. The 3 patents that actually make the company function. I want it on record that those patents are mine, not the company's. And I want licensing rights contingent on terms I'll specify later. Desmond stopped writing. Lester, he said carefully. Those patents are the foundation of every product Brooks MedTech manufactures. If you formalize this as a disputed license instead of settled company property, any investor due diligence is going to treat it as a live IP risk. When I know, I said. I developed them. I own them. And once the board sees a letter challenging the informal license, Alaric's been operating under the company's investors are going to want answers before they put in another dollar. That could freeze the Series A follow-on entirely, Desmond said. I'm aware. Silence on the line. No, I said. Freeze all supplementary credit card authorizations I've signed for tomorrow. Every account. Every authorization. Effective immediately. I heard Desmond take a breath. And one more thing, I said. When the guarantee lapses, the collateral backing Alaric's loans just evaporates. That's the bank's problem to notice, not mine. But I know what they'll do with it. They'll flag it as a covenant breach, Desmond said. That opens the door to a full review of the loan. I know. They'll likely demand restructuring, possibly immediate repayment. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. You're sure about this? Desmond asked. The question a good lawyer asks when he wants you to hear the weight of what you just said. This isn't just limiting support. This is removing the foundation. I've never been more certain of anything in my professional life. I heard him let out a slow breath. Okay, he said. I'll have everything ready by end of day. You'll need to come in tomorrow to sign. I'll be there at 9, I said. I hung up, set the phone down. looked at the notepad with the 4 numbered items. 40 years I'd been the steel beam underneath someone else's building, and now I was going to find out what that building looked like when it had to stand on its own foundation. By Saturday afternoon, Tamara's credit cards were frozen. Every supplementary account, every authorization I'd signed over the years. The cards she'd used for concerts, flights, VIP packages. The ones that never asked for payment because payment came automatically from accounts I'd set up to cover whatever she spent. Gone. Sunday morning, I signed the formal demand letters at Desmond's office. 2 letters. One to Alaric. One to Tamara. Professionally worded. Legally precise, backed by every email and text where they'd promised to pay me back. 30 days to return the full amount of all personal loans extended over the past decade. $7 million. 30 days. By Sunday afternoon, the guarantee's lapse had flagged a covenant breach on the collateral backing Alaric's business loans. That triggers one thing automatically: immediate review. The bank has to reassess whether the loan still makes sense, whether the collateral still holds, whether the risk profile has changed enough to require action. It had. It would. By Sunday evening, Desmond called. "It's done," he said. "Everything you asked for. 48 hours. "Thank you," I said. "Oh, Lester," he said. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. "In 20 years, I've never seen you do anything remotely like this. Are you—" "I'm fine," I said. "I'm better than I've been in years." I meant it. I hung up. Went to find Carolyn. She was in the kitchen making tea. "It's done?" she asked without looking up. "It's done." She nodded, poured 2 cups, handed one to me. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd talked 4 nights ago. Where we'd aligned ourselves. Where we'd decided what came next. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I should have done this 10 years ago," I said. "There's a particular kind of silence that comes after you stop holding something up. Not the silence of destruction. The silence of things finally honestly settling into what they actually weigh. No more pretending the weight doesn't exist. No more telling yourself you're strong enough to carry it forever. Just the quiet truth of letting go and seeing what happens when you do." I'd spent 40 years holding up my children's lives, holding up their choices, holding up their mistakes, holding up everything they built on the assumption I'd always be there to keep it from falling. And now I'd let go. By Monday morning, my son would open his email and find a 30-day demand for $7 million. By Monday morning, the bank would call him about the material adverse change notice and the immediate restructuring requirements. By Monday morning, he'd realized that the company he thought he built was about to stop functioning without the patents he didn't know I owned. There's a silence that comes after you stop holding something up, things settling into their actual weight. Monday morning came exactly as I knew it would. I set the phone face down, picked up the contract. 3rd paragraph, calibration cycle requirements. The phone rang, Alaric's name on the screen. First time I'd seen it there since Vegas. Since the night he'd told me to my face that I was embarrassing myself, and I'd watched my wife collapse in that ballroom. I let it ring 3 times, then picked up. "Yes," I said. "Dad." His voice was tight, strained. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything, just waited. "The bank called," he said. "About the guarantee, the personal guarantee. They're saying letting it lapse breaches the loan covenant, and they're flagging it as a material adverse change on their end. They want documentation. They want reassurance. They need you to confirm the guarantee is still valid." "I see," I said. "What can you call them?" he asked. "Today. This morning. They're reviewing the whole loan structure, and they need to hear from you that, Why is the bank reviewing your loan?" I asked. My voice was perfectly level. "What?" I asked why they're reviewing it. "What changed Silence. Then, revenue dropped. Some contracts we expected didn't renew. Dexter's connections, they're not materializing the way he said they would. But it's temporary. The bank just needs reassurance that the collateral backing is solid. And the collateral is my personal guarantee, I said. Yes. Which is why I need you to call them and confirm it's still in place. I looked out the office window. Morning light, clear sky, everything normal. No, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not calling the bank, I said. And I'm not confirming the guarantee. Dad, I'm withdrawing it, I said. Calm, matter of fact. Like I was reading from a technical manual. The guarantee expires Wednesday. I'm letting it lapse. I heard him inhale. Sharp, like I'd punched him. You can't do that, he said. If you withdraw the guarantee, the bank will. They'll call the entire loan. They'll demand immediate restructuring. The company will collapse. I finished for him. Yes, probably. Dad, please. His voice cracked on the word. Please, I'm asking you. I need this. The company needs this. If you pull the guarantee now, I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, standing behind him with my hands ready to catch him if he fell, running alongside until he found his balance, my hands ready, always ready. I realized they weren't ready anymore. You stood in front of 100 people at your own engagement party, I said quietly, and told me I was embarrassing myself. And then you and your sister and your fiancé spent 3 days ignoring my calls while I believed you were dying. You screenshotted my voicemails and laughed about them in a group chat. We were just, and then, I continued. You sent an email to Bliss, 2 weeks before Vegas, laying out your plan to slowly cut us out of your lives. No big fight, just less and less until it's clean. Those were your words. I have the email. You sent it to the wrong address. Nothing on the other end. Not even breathing. So, no, I said. I'm not calling the bank. I'm not confirming anything. I'm removing my support from people who treated me like an ATM and my wife like an inconvenience. You wanted independence. I'm honoring that. Dad, wait! I hung up. Set the phone face down again. Picked up the contract. Third paragraph. Calibration cycle requirements. My hand was completely steady. The next evening, Carolyn and I were having dinner. Simple meal, chicken, rice, green beans she'd grown in the garden out back. My phone rang. Tamara. I looked at Carolyn. She nodded. I answered. Hi, what did you do? Tamara's voice was sharp, panicked. My cards were declined. All of them. I went to pay for groceries and every single card came back declined. I called the bank and they said the accounts are frozen. What did you do? I set down my fork. Looked at Carolyn. Could you pass the salt? I asked. She slid the shaker across the table. Small gesture. 37 years of partnership in the way her hand moved. Why I closed the joint accounts, I said into the phone. The ones you had access to. The supplementary cards I authorized. All of them. Oh, you can't do that, she screamed. I need that money. I have bills. I have... You supported your brother when he humiliated us in front of 100 strangers, I said. Voice flat, factual. You told me to hire a lawyer when I asked you to help me understand what I'd done wrong. You filmed your mother crying in a hotel lobby and posted it online for thousands of strangers to laugh at. That's not you don't understand. You sold your mother's necklace, I continued. The one her grandmother left her. The only thing she had from her mother. You sold it for $4,000 to buy tickets to a fan event. You stole money from our safe during a payroll crisis and told your mother that money comes back but concerts don't. Carolyn was watching me from across the table, not interrupting. Just there. Present. the way she'd been for 37 years. I understand perfectly, I said. You wanted to live your own life, make your own choices, have boundaries. I'm respecting that. These are your choices now, your consequences, your life to figure out. You're punishing us, she said. Her voice had gone from panic to something colder. You're punishing us for not being perfect. No, I said. I'm removing my participation from relationships that only existed because I was paying for them. There's a difference. She hung up. I set my fork down, looked at my plate, at Carolyn across the table, at the life we'd built that suddenly felt quieter than it had in years. I realized I hadn't raised my voice once. Not once. I heard about bliss from Philip Graham over coffee, not from my son. The woman who said my wife looked like a valet driver left my son the same way he treated us. Philip Graham, a Nashville business contact who'd known Alaric through Chamber of Commerce. Events mentioned it casually 3 weeks after everything started falling apart. We were meeting about an unrelated contract. He stirred his coffee and said it like he was commenting on the weather. Your son's engagement fell through, I heard, he said. Shame about the timing. I set down my cup. Kept my face neutral. When did she leave? I asked. 3 weeks back, Philip said. Quiet exit. No dramatics. She just stopped showing up to events. Someone said the penthouse lease wasn't renewed. Cars went back to wherever they came from. Alaric sent an email to the social group wedding postponed indefinitely. Very professional. Very vague. He took a sip of coffee. Completely unaware he was telling me something my son hadn't bothered to mention. Bliss Donovan. Philip continued. Dexter's daughter. I heard she's already back in California. Apparently she had options lined up. Of course she did. The woman who'd looked at Carolyn and me standing in that hotel lobby and said we looked like we'd driven the valet cars. The woman who'd bet in a group chat that we'd actually fly to Vegas. The woman who'd stood beside my son while he thanked everyone except us. She'd left. Quietly. Efficiently. The moment the money disappeared. Carolyn would call this symmetry. The woman who'd called us valet drivers now scorned by the son who wouldn't defend her either. The kind of poetry she'd appreciate even though she wouldn't enjoy watching it happen. I thanked Philip for the information. Finished the meeting, drove home. Didn't call Alaric. Didn't reach out. Just filed the information away with everything else I was learning about how fast a life built on other people's money can collapse when the money stops. Over the next month, I tracked the rest of it through public filings and the occasional update from acquaintances who didn't realize they were telling me things my children should have told me themselves. The bank triggered material adverse change the day after I withdrew the guarantee. Formal language, legal precision. It meant one thing: the risk profile had changed, and they needed immediate restructuring. They gave Alaric 30 days. I pulled the filing one evening in my office, read through it like I was reading someone else's story. Material adverse change. Demand for immediate capital infusion or full loan repayment. Review of all collateral. Verification of asset ownership. 30 days to prove the company could function without the guarantee I'd been providing. 30 days to show he owned what he claimed to own. He didn't. The patents were mine, and the letter challenging Alaric's license to them was already sitting with the board. The core equipment had been purchased with loans I'd co-signed. The client relationships existed because of my reputation in the medical device industry. The office space was leased under terms I'd negotiated. Once investors saw a live IP dispute sitting on top of a covenant breach, nobody was willing to put in the capital to save it. Brooks MedTech wasn't worth $52 million without someone willing to bet on it, and nobody was, which turned out to be the whole problem. I sat in my office reading the public filings and realized 30 days. He didn't have 30 hours of real assets. The company folded in 6 weeks, not dramatically, Not with news coverage or bankruptcy scandal, just quietly. The way most small businesses fail when they realize they can't make payroll and the bank wants its money back. I heard about it the same way I heard about Bliss leaving, through someone who knew someone who'd worked there, through the Nashville business community that talks about these things over coffee and lunch meetings. Alaric tried to restructure, tried to find new investors, tried to prove the company could stand on its own. It couldn't, because it never had. November, Carolyn came into the living room with her phone in her hand. "Someone sent this to me," she said. "Thought you should see." She handed me the phone. Social media post from someone whose name I didn't recognize. A former member of Tamara's fandom community. The post was a screenshot of another post Tamara's apparently, though her account was set to private now. The screenshot showed Tamara in some kind of retail uniform. Name tag, polo shirt. The kind of job college kids take for spending money. The caption from the person who'd shared it: "Remember when she used to post from first class? Now she's asking if I want fries with that capped off with a skull emoji." I handed the phone back to Carolyn. "How did you get this?" I asked. "Someone from church," she said. Her daughter was in Tamara's online groups. She thought we should know. I nodded. Her entire feed was brunches and first-class upgrades, I said. Not angry, just observing. Concert tickets, VIP packages, meet and greets, shopping hauls. Every day was content about the next experience she couldn't wait to have. $400,000, Carolyn said quietly. And she can't pay her electric bill. I found out later through the same network of people who tell you things because they think you already know that Tamara's allowance had stopped when I closed the accounts. That she'd tried to make rent on credit cards that no longer worked. That her influencer friends had offered thoughts and prayers and words of encouragement, but no actual money. That at 25 years old, she'd taken her first hourly job, not because she wanted work experience or career development or any of the reasons most people start working, but because she needed to pay her electric bill and her landlord wouldn't accept exposure from her social media following as rent payment. I remembered teaching her to count change when she was 6, sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of coins, showing her how to stack quarters, count by fives. Her little fingers carefully organizing the coins into neat piles. The pride on her face when she got to $1. I wondered if she remembered any of that now. If she thought about it when she was counting change for customers who didn't know she used to spend more on a single concert ticket than they made in a week. They arrived without warning. No phone call, no text. Just headlights in the driveway at dusk. A worn-out rental sedan. No watch, no designer clothes. Just 2 figures at the gate. I was in the living room when I saw the car pull up. Old model, dented bumper. The kind of vehicle you rent when you can't afford anything better and you need to get somewhere anyway. Alaric stepped out first. No watch. I noticed that immediately. The wrist that used to carry $83,000 worth of Swiss engineering was bare. His clothes were plain. Jeans. A jacket that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack. Nothing designer. Nothing that screamed wealth or status or success. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tamara got out of the passenger side. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup I could see from this distance. Wearing clothes I'd never seen before, the kind you buy when you're trying to make a budget stretch, and fashion isn't the priority anymore. They stood at the gate. Didn't move toward the house. Just stood there. Looking at the door like they weren't sure if they should knock. No call, no warning, just here. The watch was gone. The designer labels were gone. The confidence was gone. They looked like strangers wearing my children's faces. I heard footsteps behind me. Carolyn. She came to the window, stood beside me, looked out at the 2 people standing at our gate in the fading light. She didn't say anything at first, just watched. Then quietly, "Do you want me to open it?" I didn't answer. Couldn't find the words yet. Lester, she said, softer. Do you want me to let them in? Give me a minute, I said. She nodded. Put her hand on my arm. Didn't push, didn't rush. Just stood there with me while I tried to figure out what I was supposed to feel. I watched them through the glass. Alaric shifted his weight. Foot to foot. The same way he used to stand before basketball tryouts when he was 13. Nervous energy he didn't know what to do with. I remembered that. Tamara wrapped her arms around herself against the evening cold, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Did it again. Then a third time. Nervous tell. She'd been doing it since she was 12. Every time she had to give a presentation in school. Every time she was about to ask for something she wasn't sure she'd get. I remembered that too. I remembered Alaric at 7, running up the same driveway with a blue ribbon from the science fair. Face lit up like he'd won the lottery. Tamara chasing behind him, demanding to see it, wanting to hold it, wanting to be part of the victory. When did that gate stop being a boundary and start being a barrier? When did my own driveway start feeling like no man's land? Take your time, Carolyn said quietly. I looked for the children I'd raised, the ones I'd spent 40 years trying to give everything I never had. I found fragments, the way Alaric's shoulders hunched when he was uncertain about something. The way Tamara's eyes kept darting to the house and then away like she was building up courage. I saw them, the children I knew. The ones I'd taught to ride bikes and count change and stand up for themselves when the world pushed back. But I also saw the people who'd let us believe they were dead for 3 days and called it a lesson. The people who'd screenshotted my desperate calls and laughed about them in a group chat. The people who'd turned their mother's pain into social media content. The people who'd written an email laying out a plan to slowly erase me from their lives. I saw both, and I couldn't unsee either. They look cold, Carolyn said. They do, I agreed. They look scared. Yes. When does a father stop being responsible for saving his children from consequences they built themselves? When does unconditional love become unconditional enabling? When does helping become hurting? I'd spent 40 years trying to give them everything, and somewhere along the way, I'd taught them that everything would always be given, that they never had to earn it, that Dad would always be there to catch them, to pay for them, to fix whatever they broke. I'd taught them to expect the net, and when I finally removed it, they fell. What are you thinking? Carolyn asked. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say when I open that door, I said. And what are you going to say? I watched Alaric check his phone, watched him look at the door again, watched him say something to Tamara, watched her nod. They'd come here because they had nowhere else to go. Not because they understood what they'd done, not because they wanted to make amends, but because they'd run out of options, and I was the only one left who might catch them. I'm going to tell them the truth, I said. The truth I should have told them years ago. Which is that I love them, I said. And that love doesn't mean I have to keep participating in my own harm. Carolyn squeezed my arm. Okay, she said. I stood at that window long enough to see the sun finish setting, long enough to watch my children shift from foot to foot in the cold, long enough to remember every moment that had led us here. Every choice I'd made thinking I was helping. Every choice they'd made thinking they were entitled. Every moment we'd all pretended this could last forever. I stood at that window long enough to understand what I was about to do wasn't revenge. It was honesty. I opened the door. They came inside. Alaric first, Tamara behind him. Both of them moving like they weren't sure they had permission to be here. I led them to the living room. The same room where Carolyn had collapsed after the Vegas call. The same room where we'd spent 3 days convinced our children were dying. They sat on the couch. I sat across from them. Carolyn stayed in the kitchen doorway, watching, present but not inserting herself yet. Alaric looked at me. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying in the car. Dad, he said. His voice broke on the word. Please. You're destroying our lives over one party. He said it like it was reasonable, like it made sense. And I understood in that moment he genuinely believed his version. One party, that's what he'd reduced it to. One party. One party, I repeated. My voice was level, calm. 23 calls, Alaric. You watched us make 23 calls believing you might be dead. You screenshotted them. You and your sister and your fiancé. You put them in a group chat with laughing emojis. He opened his mouth, closed it. That party, I asked. The one where we flew across the country because we thought our children were dying. The one where you stood in a ballroom and thanked everyone except the two people who made everything in that room possible, that party. It wasn't, he started. You filmed your mother, I said, looking at Tamara now, crying in a hotel lobby, and you posted it online. Thousands of strangers laughing at your mother's pain for content. Tamara's face crumpled. She started crying. We didn't mean, Alaric tried again. You sent an email, I continued, to Bliss, laying out a plan to slowly cut us out of your lives. No big fight, just less and less until it's clean. You sent it 2 weeks before Vegas. It wasn't impulse, it was strategy. Alaric stared at me. How did you? You sent it to the wrong address, I said. Brooks MedTech admin account. I saw it. Silence. Heavy. The kind that fills a room until there's no air left. Adele, this isn't fair, Alaric said finally. His voice had gone from pleading to something harder. You're punishing us for one mistake, for wanting boundaries, for wanting to live our own lives. So Mom would never agree to this, he said, turning to look at Carolyn. She's making you do this. She's turning you against us. Carolyn stepped forward from the kitchen doorway. For 37 years, she'd stood behind me, supported me from a step back. Let me lead while she held everything together from just out of sight. But she didn't stand behind me now. She stood beside me, next to me, equal, partner. Your father and I made every decision together, she said. Her voice was steady, strong. The same way we've made every decision for 37 years. Alaric looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. You can't mean that, he said. I mean it, she said. Every word. I remembered Alaric at 8 years old, crying over a science project that had fallen apart the night before it was due. He'd worked on it for weeks, built a model of the solar system out of foam balls and wire. And the night before presentation day, it collapsed. Just fell apart. He'd cried like his world was ending. I'd stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him rebuild it. We'd finished at 3. He'd gotten a blue ribbon. When did he stop believing I'd help him? When did I stop being the person he called? When something fell apart. Alaric stood up. His hands were shaking. You're punishing us, he said, for wanting independence, for wanting to make our own choices, for wanting lives that don't revolve around you. I stood up too, calm, deliberate, walked to the front door, opened it, wide. Cold December air rushed in. I turned back to look at them, at my son and my daughter sitting on my couch, looking like their world had ended. The day you let us spend 3 days believing you might be dead, I said, while you screenshotted our calls and laughed about them, that's the day this family ended. My voice was quiet, but it carried. Not today, I said. That day. Family isn't blood or history. It's not who raised you or whose name you carry. It's what you do when someone is afraid you're dead. It's whether you answer the phone or screenshot the call. It's whether you show up or you make excuses. It's whether you love someone or you use them. Alaric looked at the open door, at me standing beside it, at his mother standing beside me. You're serious, he said, like he still couldn't quite believe it. I'm serious, I said. Tamara was still crying. quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. "Where are we supposed to go?" she asked. Voice small, broken. "I don't know," I said. "The same place you were going when you planned to slowly cut us out of your lives. The same place you went when you ignored our calls for 3 days. Wherever that was, I'm sure you'll find it again." "Dad Allen," Alaric started. I love you," I said, and I meant it. "I will always love you. But I won't participate in relationships where love only flows one direction. Where I'm valued for what I provide and discarded when I have nothing left to give." I stood at that door, holding it open, Carolyn beside me. "You're welcome to leave," I said. "Or you're welcome to stay and hear the rest of what I need to say. But either way, the relationship we had, the one where I gave and you took and we all pretended that was family, that relationship is over." They stood, slowly, like they were moving through water, walked to the door, stopped in front of me. Alaric opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't undo what was done. It just acknowledges it happened." They walked through the door, into the cold December night. I held the door open until they walked through it. This wasn't me shutting them out. They'd already left. The silence felt nothing like the 3 days I'd spent convinced they were dying. This had the right weight. I sat alone in the living room. Carolyn had gone upstairs. I heard the shower running, the sound of someone washing off a confrontation she'd never wanted to have. The house felt larger somehow, like we'd removed furniture instead of just my children's entitlement. I took a full breath. No restriction in my chest. No knot of anxiety about what tomorrow might be spending, which creditor might call, or whether my children actually cared if I lived or died. Just air moving the way it was supposed to. First time in months. I looked at my phone. 3 missed calls from Bliss. 2 texts from Dexter that I deleted without reading. Nothing from Tamara, which meant she was already looking for a lawyer she couldn't afford. I dialed Desmond. He answered on the first ring. "You want to rewrite the entire trust." "I'm from scratch," I said. "Like it never existed. Your children could challenge it. Let them." I moved to the window. The December light looked cleaner somehow. "I'm of sound mind. I have documentation of everything they've done. I'm done negotiating with people who only call when they need money." "What do you want the new trust to say?" I'd been thinking about this since Dexter smirked at me across that ballroom. Since Bliss mocked my wife in front of 100 strangers. Since I understood that my legacy was sitting in the hands of people who'd proven they didn't deserve it. "Scholarship foundations," I said. "Every dollar. Orphans and children of fallen military and first responders." Desmond went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "We're talking about $52 million, Lester. I know exactly how much we're talking about. My children had already received their inheritance. Houses, cars, business capital. 20 years of me saying yes when I should have said no. They weren't getting another dollar. Here's what nobody tells you about disinheritance. It's not punishment. It's a statement of values. My children believed my legacy was money. I was about to prove them wrong. We spent 40 minutes on specifics. The scholarships would prioritize children who'd lost parents in service. Character and need would matter more than grades. No child would be turned away for choosing a trade over a 4-year degree. "You're building something that'll outlast you by generations," Desmond said. "That's the point," I said. After we hung up, I poured bourbon. No toast, there was nothing celebratory about cutting your own children out of your will. But there was something right about it. The first honest decision I'd made in years. Carolyn came downstairs, hair still damp. She sat beside me and took my hand, not to comfort, but to anchor. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about 3 days ago, convinced my children were dying. I thought about this morning walking into a confrontation I'd spent years avoiding. I thought about where I sat now. Free, I said, free from their expectations. Free from the guilt of never being enough. Free from the fantasy that money could buy the relationship I'd always wanted. The hardest part of loving someone isn't letting go. It's accepting that you cannot save them from themselves, and that trying only destroys you both. I raised my glass, drank alone. The bourbon burned in the right way. Outside, December was going dark. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: certainty. Not happiness, this hurt too much for happiness, but certainty that I'd made the right choice, that my legacy would mean something real. My legacy isn't going to people who couldn't answer my calls. It's going to children who'd give anything for someone to call them. Some nights the ache still comes. But I remember the ballroom, the screenshot, and the ache settles. The phone stopped ringing entirely after the trust meeting. Bliss had called 17 times that first week. Dexter left voicemails that began as apologies and ended as threats. Tamara sent one text, "You'll regret this," and then nothing. Silence, clean and complete. December arrived with a quiet I hadn't known in years. No creditor calls, no dread about what my children might be spending. Just the steady rhythm of a house where two people had lived together for 37 years. Carolyn and I returned to our routines. Coffee at 6, evening walks. The Sunday crossword she always finished first. One evening, she set down her mug and said Philip Graham had seen Dexter at the grocery store. "Well, how did he look?" "Tired," she said. "But okay." That was all I needed to know. Through his Nashville circles, Lester heard that Bliss and Dexter had taken a small apartment together on the outskirts of town, sharing rent for the first time in their lives. Dexter was doing freelance consulting. Bliss had found work as an administrative assistant. Tamara had moved in with a friend from her yoga studio. No designer handbags, no Aspen. Just the ordinary weight of rent that everyone else had been carrying all along. I didn't reach out, not from spite, but because I'd already said everything that needed saying. The rest was theirs. Christmas came quietly. Lester and Andrea brought their 2 boys who still looked at me like I hung the moon. We didn't mention Bliss or Dexter or Tamara. Some absences speak louder when you stop trying to fill them. Afterward, Carolyn and I returned to the back porch. Cold enough to see our breath, but we wrapped ourselves in old quilts and stayed. The oak tree where we'd hung the tire swing. The rose patch Barbara had planted before the cancer took her. The porch steps Lester had helped me rebuild at 16. All of it still there. Just different now. But some nights I still see them as children, I said. Me too, Carolyn answered. But that doesn't change what happened. No, she agreed. It doesn't. She placed her hand over mine, the same gesture 37 years running. I thought about the scholarship fund. The orphans who would receive it after Carolyn and I were gone. Children who'd lost parents to war or fire or the 1,000 ways the world takes people too soon. I didn't know their names or their faces, but I knew one truth with complete certainty: they would be grateful. Not because they were better than my children, but because gratitude only grows in the space between need and kindness. You can't appreciate a hand reaching down if you've never known what it means to fall. I understood that at 7, standing in Margaret's kitchen with a sandwich I hadn't had to steal. Took me until 69 to accept it was never meant for my children. It was meant for someone else's. "You okay?" Carolyn asked. "Yeah," I said. "I am." And I was. And to you listening to my story, remember this: love and money were never meant to be the same currency. I spent decades thinking that providing everything meant giving everything. I thought financial security would guarantee gratitude. I was wrong. Don't make my mistake. Don't confuse comfort with character. Don't wait until you're 69 to realize that some gifts destroy the people you're trying to protect. The hardest lesson I learned was this: you can't buy what should have been built. This isn't really about family justice, though. That's what it became. It's about recognizing when love turns into enabling. Some call stories like these dad's revenge stories, but revenge was never the goal, correction was. God put me through this for a reason, to show me that legacy isn't about who inherits your money, it's about who carries your values. True family justice isn't punishment, it's protection. If you're listening to Dad's revenge stories hoping for vindication, I hope you find something deeper, the courage to protect what you've built. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced something similar? What would you have done? Please share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Wise Revenge for more stories about standing up for yourself when the people you love let you down. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your presence here means more than you know. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized for narrative and reflection purposes.